Hey everyone, thanks for coming. Like within over here or just like back there?
That's the easiest way to go back there, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks guys for coming. So I'll be, again, talking about Edgeware. Thank you, Jack, for emceeing this whole day. I guess I'll wait for everyone to kind of take their seats or settle down a little bit. Cool. So hi, everyone. I'm Dillon Chen. I'm one of the co-founders of Commonwealth Labs. Commonwealth Labs is a company in New York. We work on multiple products focused on the governance space. But in particular, I'll be talking about Edgeware. We're still pretty distributed. We have people in San Francisco. We work with folks in Detroit as well as Europe as well. And we spend a lot of time with the Parity team as we work on Substrate. But today, I'll be talking about what Edgeware is. And TLDR, or actually, let me move on to the next slide. What is Edgeware? Oh, can I work this? What is Edgeware? I guess I spoiled it already, but this is the first result on DuckDuckGo. I don't use Google anymore. So please help us with the SEO as we can. So Edgeware is this like small, I mean, I don't want to read the exact same thing. So we have a long way to go to kind of spread the Edgeware name, but hopefully a little bit of what we can do today is doing that. But in crypto land, what Edgeware is, it's a few things. It's a dev-friendly smart contract platform that has WASM, so you can build within any language, and then it compiles down to the WASM toolchain. You can distribute, we're distributing tokens directly to the community, and I'll dive into each point specifically as this kind of presentation goes on. And furthermore, from that initial token distribution, what will happen is people will continuously vote to allocate more tokens from the treasury to fund different projects, to validate different nodes, to help other open source projects within the space. And lastly, we kind of inherit scalability from Polkadot in building within the ecosystem. And so I'll talk through the first point. So if the room is pretty developer friendly, is everyone like, what is the breakdown of the room? Is it mostly developers here? Can I get like a show of hands? Okay, all right, so everyone, I don't need to know, I don't need to discuss that. So, WASM, dev-friendly, with this little emoji over here. As we know, if we've been developing in the crypto space for a while, previous company of ours called Source, that was Airbnb for Wi-Fi. We were building smart contracts in 2015, 2016. And ran into a lot of just challenges around tooling. And so we're really excited to be able to build with a whole set of WASM toolchains built by the larger community outside of just cryptocurrency. I think one of the things that we also think about a lot is how we can engage developers outside of maybe this room or who are kind of familiar with the lingo that we talk about every single day. We're recent grads, and a lot of the things that we see on US campuses are still a lot of developers focused on just machine learning or just normal web dev. And so there's a lot of communication that can happen around just bringing developers over to the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And we think a lot of that can happen with WebAssembly and hopefully with Substrate as well. Other kind of features that help make Edgeware dev-friendly are built on Substrate. And so we announced originally Edgeware, the project, at Web3 Summit right after Gav talked. So he, at Web3, if you didn't see it, it'll go down as one of the greatest presentations ever, kind of a Steve Jobs-like moment in which he built and customized a Substrate chain. And we talked about what we're building at Edgeware right after that. And so basically, the way we see Substrate, is it's 3 layers. It's the module level, where you can build different components that you want to integrate into your toolchain, or I keep saying toolchain, your parachain. And then underneath that, you have the consensus layer, and then underneath that, you have this networking layer. And so the things that we don't have to worry about are the things underneath that, right? We're focused on the smart contract level. We're focused on the governance aspects around making that an easy developer experience. And so we were able to not, we didn't have to focus on the things that were a little bit too heavy-handed, so to speak. And so for us, the way we kind of like build and integrate with the Substrate ecosystem is by building these sets of governance tools. And again, I'll dive further into this, but from UIs, different voting modules, social norms, an aggregated community that we can hopefully bring to the rest of the Polkadot ecosystem, Polkadot Web3 ecosystem. And again, from the Web3/Substrate and Polkadot side, we can bring in the core technology that kind of helps make things great. And obviously, all these things will be voted in with the on-chain governance that we inherit from Substrate. And again, a lot of confusion from our own experiences working on different platforms is the fact that sometimes we have a lack of a clear roadmap, and lack of clarity often leads to uncertainty around how things are being built. You know, and this comes from our own experience. One of the things we hope to do on Edgeware is to have the community come up with a roadmap, you know, something a year or two out, have that be formalized on chain, and then voted on, essentially, to be implemented. And so there's a whole set of tools around that, built on chain to help start to bootstrap that process, and the wider set of tools around that to help make that developer experience seamless and simple. And so this kind of goes to the second aspect from the tooling around Edgeware. There's the idea of distributing those tokens right to the community right at the start. And so we're doing this in a process called the lock drop. I can't even remember who coined the term, but it's kind of stuck. And so the lock drop is a pretty simple process where anyone can time lock their Ethereum, and they can receive Edgeware tokens, or Edge for short, once that lock drop is over. And so what the lock drop is a really simple set of contracts. There's the lock drop contract. I should have inserted the slide to show you how what it actually looks like. But there's a lock drop contract in which you send ETH to. You specify the amount of time that you want to lock up for, 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. And you essentially are able to generate your own lock-specific contract. So none of the funds are custodied. None of the funds are used to fund further development on the project. The lock drop is just to distribute tokens to the community, to bootstrap the network and distribute tokens widely. And so again, we want everyone to participate in this process. It should be open. It should be open to core developers, validators, anyone who kind of wants to gain a foothold or an entry point into the Substrate Polkadot ecosystem should hopefully come over to Edgeware. And as the slide says, 90% of the tokens are being given away. So there's a small portion that's kind of reserved for initial contributors. And 90% of the initial distribution, as well as the inflation that comes after, will fund different developers and validators. And so this is the lock schedule, essentially. So there's another thing that I didn't mention is this ability for you to signal. And so hopefully we can actually further distribution, because we know that 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, that's quite a bit of time. And you can essentially, you have to weigh the opportunity cost of holding ETH against essentially participating in this network. And so there's a bonus associated with this, and we want to make this as friendly as possible for anyone to participate. The additional feature of the signal, essentially something that happened with the Carbon vote, we take a snapshot of the ETH chain, and then once you essentially from a single address, you can say, hey, I want a signal from this address. Your balance will be taken into account, and you'll be able to claim Edgeware tokens 12 months after the network launches, right? And so, although it widens distribution, obviously there's a few game theoretic things that go on. If you get your tokens from locking up and signaling, you get something, you're able to participate in the network already to essentially either earn further tokens or participate and spin up dApps earlier. So there is a little bit of stuff to play around with the drops and the signals. And so who should participate? Again, it should be anyone who participates in a smart contract chain itself. So core network devs that want to see further improvements to their own chain, they can, again, experiment with the on-chain governance here. Stakers and validators, they can earn rewards. We're looking at 20% inflation in the first year. 10% of the total inflation, or 50% of the block reward, will be given to stakers. And so depending on the actual amount of tokens that are delegated towards validators or stakers, we should see an inflation rate of something like 12.5%, which puts us in line with other chains out there. So it should be an economically competitive network, so to speak. And given the on-chain governance aspect and the tools that we build around that, we should be able to have something where you can create different DAOs to experiment on the network. Well, I won't dive too far into it right now. We're building an exciting set of tools on the module level to help enable experimentation around this. And again, it's a fully functional smart contract platform. It's something that directly integrates with Polkadot. So if you want to dip your toes into the Polkadot ecosystem, this is kind of the ideal way to start if you don't want to spin up something and mess around with different modules, which can be a little fearful, but it's actually not that hard. So again, there's this community-governed block reward. So the community-governed block reward is governed by Edgeware governance. And so the modules that we've decided to build, defining storage, defining different function calls, are centered around these different things. So from the center outwards, this is actually a module that we inherit from the Substrate library itself, is this council module. And so in this council, you essentially are peer weighted voters. So it's one-to-one voting based on an account. And the actions, the votes that you take here, basically affect how the rest of the ecosystem can vote. So there's this notion of quorum biasing, and depending on if there is a majority vote, a supermajority of the council members, or even a unanimous vote, that will affect the amount of, that will affect the quorum needed to actually reach something that actually has a binding effect for on-chain governance. But the council and voting members onto the council is not the only way to participate. So within democracy, you can actually think of as the ring around this kind of central layer of governance. So within democracy, one, you're always going to be voting in different council members. Initially, we'll start with 6 council members as we start to grow the community. But we would like to expand that to around 30. Again, as Ryan talked about before, within the Web3 ecosystem, what we'd like to see is a set of norms develop where not just validators, not just different open source developers come onto the network. We hope all of them will participate in this on-chain governance process. And so this council and voting different members on in a rotating fashion with a fixed term is our way to kind of help solve that. Additionally, within the democracy module, essentially what will happen is that you'll be able to vote and send in a specific proposal. So anyone who holds Edgeware token is able to do this. The way that this happens is that they lock a certain amount of token, they will send a proposal to the chain itself, and then it'll populate and be able to be populated into any kind of API or application that is able to reference the chain. And then people will vote, and hopefully all things go well and a change gets integrated. So there's 2 ways to participate in Edgeware governance. So a proposal, as I mentioned before, can come from the council module itself. It can be voted on by the set of peer voters, or it can be brought forth by anyone in the community itself. But what direction should the community move in? What direction should Edgeware itself move in? And so that's something that we decided needed a little more clarity around. While a lot of conversation happens on Twitter, on Discord, on Reddit, and we love those communities, we use those tools every single day, it can be kind of tough to decide what actually is the signal and what actually is just noise. And so the signaling module that we've built are a set of non-binding polls or voting options to allow you to see, okay, this is what this set of users or voters actually wants. And so we'll start to tailor different democracy proposals, different council proposals to this. So within the signaling module that we've built, there's a few different voting strategies, and we hope to essentially integrate more over time. But a few of them that we've prototyped right now are just the normal binary votes that happen, multi or multiple choice ballots, commit reveal schemes, and we're starting to experiment with some ZK snark-based anonymous voting. We'd like to do some linkable ring stuff. We'll see if we have time in the next few months before the chain gets launched. And so that whole governance process that I just mentioned before, a large proponent of that, beyond just voting on core network upgrades, is to govern this Edgeware DAO. This half of this block reward will always be allocated to this on-chain treasury. And so, again, that should be 10% of the network in the first year. And so this should fund different validators, different node developers, different end users. And it works like a DAO. And so that means anyone who holds Edgeware token should be able to participate. We want it to be an open process. Again, I can't stress that enough. So I think we've internally fielded 20, 25 different proposals. And as we kind of start to spin up this custom UI to participate in Edgeware governance, you can kind of start to see that right away. This is the UI that I mentioned. These screenshots are actually old, so please don't judge. We are actually a week or two away from having full transaction signing with MyCrypto and MetaMask to engage in Edgeware governance. So this is, we would like to see essentially a homepage as well as different proposals. It should look a lot like GitHub, something that we all should hopefully be familiar with. And it should make it easy to participate in these on-chain votes. I think one thing to note is that, as I click through these things, is that we want the UI that we build to be extensible and work across different chains. So within the Substrate ecosystem, we'd like to integrate with those chains as well, and in the broader community, not just Edgeware, not just Polkadot. All chains need governance, whether that be on-chain informal or just using the signaling libraries that we built. Everyone has their own governance process, and we're still looking for empirical evidence, obviously, for what types of governance actually works. And so the more experiments that we can run, the more processes, the more organizations that actually participate in this process, the more data that we can gather, all add to this kind of effort that we're all participating in trying to help make organizations run better. And obviously one concern with token-weighted voting, especially within the democracy level, is preventing plutocracy. I won't rehash the same arguments that Ryan talked about. Plutocracy may or may not lead to bad decisions. It depends who holds the tokens. And we feel that with the validation and the block reward, we should be able to, one, distribute tokens more fairly between the different network actors. But we also feel like we have a few specific tactics to essentially prevent against plutocracy. And of course, one thing to note here is that we can always change these things, right? These are all live processes. They're never set in stone. It's a binding set of norms that we have with each other that are formalized into a process. And so these are the norms that we want to start with, is the locked duration voting that we inherit from building on Substrate. And so, to TLDR, I know there are a few people that walked in, but so locked duration voting is essentially when you vote within the democracy level, you can say like, hey, I want to lock for 2 weeks. Hey, I want to lock for 4 weeks. It's something, like the lock drop that we're doing. And for the additional amount of time that you lock for, you get essentially a bonus. Right? So we want you to put skin in the game for something that you vote for. And obviously, larger holders of tokens can also do this. But if they're really, if they really feel strongly about something, then hopefully that's something that they're looking out for their own interest here, right? And so quorum biasing is another tactic that we can use. So based on the overall participation rate, and we know one thing that we've seen within nonprofits in traditional settings, the Sierra Club usually has like a vote participation rate of 5 or 6%, right, for this organization. And we see, within different Aragon proposals or proposals within the larger ecosystem, voting and getting participation is often tough. And so we want to make sure, even if there is low voter participation, that we can actually get to the results that individuals actually want for the whole network. And so if there's lower participation, you should have a supermajority that is larger than just 50%, just a majority. And so there's a formula that, again, I realized I should have just posted on here instead of describing, but essentially what that'll do is as the number of people, as the quorum rate rises, you need less of a majority, eventually converging to 50% as the total participation converges to 100%. Again, another way to prevent plutocracy or other kind of malicious voters is integrating identity. This is actually another module that we're building out, is a way to essentially ingest different claims or verify or create different claims about an Edgeware address. One of the things, so I clicked through here before. If you can see in the top right corner, does this laser pointer work? Top right corner, you have here Raymond. Raymond is another one of our co-founders. This is, this is his GitHub handle. And so what actually happens with Edgeware and Edge identity is you can submit a claim about some different network that you participate in, whether it be GitHub, Twitter, LinkedIn, why not, Telegram, whatever groups that we participate, and link your identity. Obviously, this is an opt-in process, right? So you can obviously remain totally anonymous if you so choose to. But it helps bring a little bit of transparency towards the network to see who is actually participating in this process. It also gives the added benefit of when you're actually talking about these things in a public forum on Twitter and stuff, you can actually see who actually holds skin in the game, right? And you can weigh their opinion against everyone else's to have a more informed opinion about what actually is going on. And so that's identity. And furthermore, identity is kind of the basis for other interesting voting mechanisms that can be processed. So for something like quadratic voting, we need a stable identity set, right? If you can move your tokens from one account to another account, then you can start to split your vote, and that's a malicious attack. So we need to be Sybil resistant. So if we can define an identity or voting set from this identity module that we built, whether that be the set of individuals who have linked their Twitter identity to an Edgeware address, we can start to run these experimentations around one person, one vote, one account, or one identity, one vote, or something like QV, which hopefully may be the silver bullet to all of our governance questions, who knows. And last but not least, Edgeware inherits a lot of scalability from Polkadot. So one thing to note is the lock drop will happen June 1st. And so Edgeware itself should be able to autonomously boot, so to speak, right before Polkadot actually launches mainnet. So a little bit more on the lock drop process. The lock drop will happen June 1st to June 15th, 2 weeks. And then after that, you should be able to reference all the events that were fired in the process of creating a lock or creating a signal, right? And from that, anyone can go to GitHub, look at our client, and then essentially say they can use the script we've built to, it's lockdrophelper.js is what the file is called, and should be able to pull the Ethereum chain to see the initial Genesis config of who's actually locked, who's actually signaled, and basically spin up that Genesis config. And so from there, they should be able to participate in this on-chain governance process, either validating or voting on different proposals within the network. And one of the proposals that will eventually happen as Polkadot comes online Edgeware itself, in the first place, will still have to be a solo chain, so to speak. It'll be all alone on its own island. And as Polkadot comes online, it will have to be integrated into, it'll have to be integrated as a pair chain within this ecosystem, right? And so what happens to the Edgeware token holders? What happens to the validators and different participants on the network? That will be a proposal that'll happen, that'll be voted on chain. Another question to ask might be, why build on Edgeware if you're a smart contract developer? I personally see a few reasons. So you still have the permissionless and composable smart contract, the design philosophy that we see on something like Ethereum, where you should be able to spin up a contract without staking or leasing or something like that, and still get that guaranteed security from Polkadot itself. So it is that still sandbox environment where you can start to play and stack different layers of smart contracts on top of each other to create a different application. It should be an easier, lighter weight way of interfacing and interacting with the Polkadot interface. So we hope to be the playground, so to speak. We hope to be the first place where developers kind of come to participate within the Polkadot Web3 ecosystem. And again, I guess I've hammered it home a little bit, but why not another comment? It should be scalable and secure. So a lot of the consensus we actually inherit from building on Substrate. Grant finality, there's a whole host of modules that are integrated into the Substrate SRML library, and you can pick and choose those components, and we've chosen to go with the things that Polkadot itself will launch with. And that brings me to my last slide, which is the Edgeware lock drop. This is really a call to action, right? So again, a lot of the work we've done already is it's towards garnering community. It's towards building up a list of 1,500 interested lock drop participants. It's building out the initial budding community of validators. I think we have around 10, 15 interested parties right now, but it's still a very, very nascent community, and we'd love for you guys to participate within that. So whether you're a core network dev, you want to participate and experiment with the on-chain governance process, or you want to develop smart contracts and need like an easier way to dip your toes into an environment that you're pretty familiar with, we feel that Edgeware can be that place. And so even before the June 2019 launch date, lock drop date, we hope you can come and join our community. So we'll be spinning out the testnet that's actually already up. You can find all the info on Edgeware and hopefully boost our SEO in the process. You can follow us on Twitter at HeyEdgeware, or you can get in touch with us at founders@commonwealth.im. And that is Edgeware. Questions? Oh, yeah. Cool. Does anyone have any questions?
For good questions, we have some really new swag and great t-shirts up here, so if you ask a question, you get one.
Yeah. Do you want to?
I don't need t-shirts because I'm going to get too many, but thank you for the offer anyway. Just question is for the token drop. I remember someone like Handshake splashed by like distributing 100 million, but that was logic was VC injecting 10 million and they put some cash injection. Are you guys doing something similar, or is this a kind of non-financial value governance token?
So you mentioned Handshake. You mentioned Handshake, and I guess can you repeat the part about cash injection?
So like if I understand correctly, they said they're going to give away 100 million worth of their token to all open source community, but the logic is they actually have 10 million worth injected from VC, right, but they inflated by distributing so much, like 70% or something. Are you doing something similar, or this is purely governance token with no financial value?
I see. So it is. So we're not. There's no. I guess to speak on the Commonwealth / Edgeware funding situation. We're equity funded essentially. Commonwealth Labs. So there are no promises for SAFTs, anything related to the Edgeware network. So the kind of handshake-like thing shouldn't happen. So it is a pure governance token. But actually, we do look up to Handshake. That in the way that they've engaged the larger open source community. So from the treasury, ideally we'd like to essentially allocate some portion of that to people who verify their identity on GitHub and link it to an Edgeware address in the kind of same fashion, right? We want to engage those sets of developers. I hope that answered your question. Yeah. Yeah, in front. Oh, wow, that's a large question. Yes. So what challenge do I foresee zero knowledge proofs in general in the future? Oh, implement. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That constrains it. So in implementing zero knowledge proofs for I guess Rust or Substrate. So I'll admit I'm not the exact person on the team working on that right now. I would be able to refer you to Drew, so he's been doing that. But I know we basically, what is the work that we've been doing internally? I think there was a little bit of trouble trying to get a sparse Merkle tree implementation to work with as like a Rust module or like a Substrate module. I think the zero knowledge stuff was like compiling independently, but to get it to work in an on-chain fashion or to get it to work in the kind of like gasless kind of environment was a little bit challenging. I think we'll also have a better answer in the next few weeks as we kind of actually are able to focus on that now that we've spun up the new testnet. But definitely check back with us, at any of the social handles that I mentioned. It should, yeah. It should, yeah. The economic parameters haven't really been tweaked from the core Substrate or Polkadot metrics, yeah. Yeah.
So you said that for now, Edgeware is going to be its own blockchain. Is there a plan to plug in Polkadot when it's running? And if so, what role do you see Edgeware playing in the broader Polkadot or Web3 ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a definitely large question. So to the first question, yes, for sure. We ideally want to be the first parachain as Polkadot network launches. I think the things, I'll say the second thing is definitely something that will be kind of emergent. So the question was, what role will the Edgeware play within the larger Web3 Polkadot ecosystem? Yeah, it'll be emergent. I think the first things to say is, how do we think smart contract platforms or Web3 will evolve as a whole? Will we kind of have this kind of permissionless, composable feature set of features, or will we kind of like push innovation to? I think this is actually borrowing your language. Pushing innovation outside of the EVM itself, or instead of having some kind of like singleton EVM. I guess like from that side, different architectures are still being tested and worked on. We're still so early that I think this is just like another entrant into how the ecosystem should develop. That's my stab at an answer. That's basically what it is, yeah. Where do I think Web3 will be, or sorry? Oh, 1 year from now. Up and running, executed 3 or 4 different governance proposals. So obviously the Treasury, those kind of proposals should happen every single month. So we should have, at this point, given away, 500 million Edgeware tokens to initial developers. From that, we should have been running. One of the governance proposals that we should do should be related to core network upgrades. So something on the consensus layer, probably not swapping something out, but something that is deeper on a technical level. We'd ideally like to integrate to improve the governance process, so actually implementing the anonymous voting module into signaling or some other core component. Certainly won't launch with that, but like we'd like to integrate that into the future. And we'd ideally like to see a growing ecosystem of smart contract developers and governance experimenters. So I guess the tool set, and this is something I didn't really talk about in the presentation, was that if Ethereum is really good and has the security model that makes it really good for different DeFi applications, we feel that Edgeware could be a place for different types of Web3 type applications where you have needs for finality, you have needs for essentially like a higher throughput with these kind of like governance features enabled. And a lot of the applications that we face today have that need. Whether that be a decentralized Twitter, a decentralized way to like actually run a wiki and actually run it effectively at scale. Those are types of things that might be able to be built on Edgeware itself. As well as kind of the other DAO type of experiments that we'd like to see. Those are the things that I'm personally interested in. I know we've engaged with various Ethereum developers, prediction market protocols, other various DeFi protocols, and they're interested in seeing as well as an entry point to the Polkadot ecosystem. And I guess the last thing I would say is we hopefully will be integrated as a parachain within the Polkadot ecosystem by then, for sure. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Dillon. Of course. So the next talk is from ChainSafe. Aiden is not here, unfortunately, to give the talk, but Greg Marco is. And ChainSafe is really, it's an interesting development house. So it's about 25 developers in Toronto, and they're building both the Ethereum 2.0 spec as well as the Polkadot Go runtime environment. So we announced the first Web3 Foundation grant, and grants are still open if folks are interested, to ChainSafe just 2 weeks ago. And so they're building a WASM interpreter, libp2p in Go, and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, give it up for Greg Marco.
Thanks, guys.